at the request of the legislature. We feel that this is a key discussion that needs to happen in Hawaii in order to make our transition to a clean energy economy. This study is going to look at different regulatory models, different ownership models, different mechanisms from an operational, a financial standpoint, as well as the ability to achieve state energy policy. And we're going to look at those structures and really drill down and try to understand what are the options and availabilities and solutions by island. And so that's a big point that I'd like to make, is that there is no presumption by the Energy Office on what the correct solution is, whether it be by island, by county. And so this is really an exploration, and in looking at these things, that's why it's so important to have the engagements and the stakeholder outreach that we're having here today. So thank you all for being here. And along those lines, the engagement is important to us, and this is the kickoff. So we have participation here in the room and also online, and I'll leave the details to LEI, but there'll be 3 additional rounds of stakeholder outreach. So we'll be coming back and visiting each island 3 more times. So the engagement process will continue, and we're really looking forward to your input and your thoughts on what will work for Hawaii. And with that, I will introduce AJ Golding, the president of LEI. He is also an associate adjunct professor at Columbia University, teaching courses on regulatory economics and market design. And he has 20 years of experience in evolving energy and electric markets. And so with that, I will turn it over to AJ.
Thank you so much. It's a great pleasure to be here today. I'm honored to have the opportunity to work with all of you on this important engagement. I'd like to introduce my colleague, Len Trinidad, who is the project manager for this study, and our colleague, Hi. So Chen Ying is also an important part of our team. As well, we're working with the Meister Group, and Christina from Meister Group will be here later today. So I just want to say a few words about the study and our work, and I want to emphasize that we do not come here with preconceived notions, nor with the idea of one size fits all. The stakeholder process is very important to us. We would not presume that just because we've seen something work elsewhere in the world, that it is the right fit for folks here, or that what works on one island is what is appropriate for another. So those are important guiding principles for our work. I think the other principle is that we intend to be thorough and thoughtful with regards to how we proceed, looking at all of the possible ways in which the utility sector could be organized, and how Hawaii can best meet its objectives for a 100% renewable future. We anticipate that we will be conducting a number of stakeholder meetings and outreach on each island, that we will work closely with Debit in our work, but be independent in our views. And that as well, over the course of the engagement, we intend to listen, confirm, put forward some ideas, and again, hear your thoughts on the ideas that are derived from these stakeholder sessions. With that, I'll turn it over to Len, who can speak more about the process.
Sure. So we have also disseminated the handout, just a summary about the project. So we have kicked this off last month with Tibet, and we're going to have 2 stakeholder outreaches, one in April next year, and the other one is September of this year. So the one in September 2017 will discuss about ownership models, and the one in April 2018 we'll discuss about the regulatory models. Today at VERGE, we are publicly launching the project stakeholders engagement process. We will have a panel discussion from 8:30 to 9:30 this morning, and after that we will have a small group discussions. We have 3 different topics, and it will be interesting to get insights from the people here in the workshop right now. So to kick off our discussion, we've assembled several stakeholders involved in this process to discuss about the topic, how can Hawaii meet its energy goals? So we have Mr. David Bisso, President CEO of KIUC, and we also have Scott Siu, Senior Vice President of Public Affairs of HICO, and we have Terry Surdus, Interim Administrator of the Hawaii State Energy Office, DBET, and lastly but not the least, we have Dean Mishina, Executive Director of the Division of Consumer Advocacy, and we have AJ Golding to facilitate the discussion.
Great. And what we're going to try and do here is to save a little bit of time at the end. We're going to go till 9:30, so we're going to run through a series of questions with our panelists to hear their thoughts. Now, our goal is really to kind of understand the vision here for Hawaii, to hear a little bit about some of the activities that are already underway to meet that vision, and to think a little bit about the challenges and opportunities. And of course, in our breakout sessions, we will explore all of these issues in greater detail. I'd like to start by asking each of our panelists here, what are some highlights of the activities that you all have been undertaking to meet the 100% renewable energy goals? And I don't know if what I'll try and do is move in different directions each time, but maybe David, if you wanted to start that would be great.
Thank you. David Bissell, Kauai Island Utility Cooperative. On Kauai, since 2010, we've moved from 8% renewable to 42% renewable. We brought on multiple utility scale PV projects, several in the 5 to 10% of the island size level. We brought on a biomass plant that does about 12% of the island's energy. We're developing hydro projects with one soon to go in construction under a purchase power agreement. And we moved most recently to the dispatchable solar projects because our grid has gotten so saturated with PV during the daytime that there's no real opportunity. We've hit as high as 97% renewable during certain time frames or several hours during sunny days when our load's relatively low. And that's moved us to the dispatchable solar projects. The most recent one, the Tesla 13 megawatt one, is online and actually serving as a peaker project for us at night to meet our peak loads, and sometimes during the mornings to meet our peak loads as well. Signed another deal with AES Solar for a bigger, cheaper, even with more storage project, and those appear to be working well, but it's relatively new technology, and we're also investigating old technology in terms of pump storage hydro project on our west side. It could be as much as 20% of the island's energy. So all said, the good news on Kauai is we've moved to over 40%. We've got projects either in front of the PUC or in active development could get us to 70% on the island. So we're moving forward. We're excited about what's going on our island.
Next.
Absolutely. I think it just makes sense to go down the line, otherwise we'll start throwing microphones back and forth and bad things could happen.
Well, good morning, everybody. I'm Scott Siu, Hawaiian Electric Company. So if I were to capture some of the things that are going on in our across the islands that we serve, which is basically every island with the exception of Dave's, we have made tremendous progress as well in terms of getting our renewable portfolio standard numbers up over the recent years. Huge amount of use of customer solar contributing to that. Of Of course, we have a lot of wind. You name it, we have practically every type of renewable resource somewhere in our system. So as we look forward, what is really going to be a big push of ours is actually working as holistically as we can from a system perspective. Because as we want to push forward and add more renewable generation, whatever the type it may be, we also have to make sure that we are investing heavily in terms of our customer programs, working with our grid to have the grid balancing capabilities as we move forward. So a little bit of what that might look like will be that as a customer, right now, all of us, basically, I think, okay, I'll speak for myself. I won't speak for others or you folks in the room, but you know, it's so easy for me right now. When I get home, I just flip on the lights, or my kids flip on the lights. They don't really think too much about it. But in the future, what we are looking at is when a customer gets home and you want to use energy, you will have more real-time understanding of what your energy is doing, how you're using it, and very importantly, how it's actually working within the broader electric utility system at that time. Because in that future, we will have programs where we will be trying to incent customers' use of energy during certain times of day. We will have, for our larger customers, programs that also help balance our grid. And that's really where a big push is in terms of our company. The other thing I would mention is that you know, one of the challenges that I see as we go forward and we keep making progress towards 100% is that we are able to, I'm going to say this, hold everybody, keep everybody working together. One of our biggest challenges as an island grid system is that there are going to be so many different choices and options and technologies in the future. And it's very important that as those technologies come into play, that we, again, try to make sure that there's benefit not only to you, the individual customer, but also you're supporting the broader grid. Our island systems are too small to have especially our larger customers, basically be operating independently, completely independently, because that means that elsewhere on the grid we have other customers who may not have the ability and resources to do the same. So it's really got to be technology focused, but very, very importantly, customer focused as well.
Hi, I'm Terry Searles, Interim Administrator for the Hawaii State Energy Office. So a lot of what we do we should be working with all sectors to help develop policy and to facilitate that in terms of moving things along towards the 100% renewables. So that's important for 2045, but I tend to be an incrementalist myself, and I was here in a different incarnation when we started the Hawaii Clean Energy Initiative. And I think one of the things we have to do is look at what do we do over the next 10 years to really push the development, both in terms of efficiency and renewable penetration. And to that end, it's the idea of working with Dean's office, working where we can with the PUC. I understand the regulators, there's a limit to the involvement we have with them, working with the utilities to really push certain things. I think some of the key things are being much more aggressive on energy efficiency. There's recently a new building code passed that the governor signed recently, and I think that's important for reducing energy use. And at the same time, one of my problems that I have is always that how do you drive down costs, not only in terms of helping people get renewables, but helping lower income families reduce energy use so that they can save money. So it's got to be something that's practical. The other thing, and I think both Dave and Scott alluded to this, is there's an explosion of new technologies coming on the distribution level and behind the meter level that, done correctly in terms of storage, demand response, data collection, telecommunications, that are going to allow us to get more terms of renewables while maintaining grid stability. And one would hope it would also be in a position to drive down costs for all end users.
Well, I guess one of the fallbacks of going last is some of my points have actually been covered by the earlier speakers. I'm with the Division of Consumer Advocacy, and the filter with which we're looking at these issues are with the consumers in mind. And there is a real concern about balance. We don't want to be rushing ahead and find that our electricity rates are actually increasing rather than staying stable or possibly even decreasing. We do believe, we do have to worry about all customer classes, not just commercial, not just residential, but certainly within the customer classes themselves. We know that there are affluent customers who can afford to buy the newest and best technology to put on their rooftops or battery, but we also have to worry about the low-income customers. We can't have a situation where our electricity rates are basically pricing out our lower middle income and low income customers, because that would be, I guess it would be social inequity, and that's something we're concerned about. I think also we are concerned about, as Scott was mentioning, maintaining the reliability of the system. Even if we have a lot of renewable energy, but we find that the reliability of the system and the resiliency of the system has gone down, I don't think we'll be doing any benefits for the customers. I think in terms of what we've been doing, I know, I'll just point out, I think 2018 is going to be a really interesting year. I'm not sure why the review of the regulatory model is going to wait until 2018, but just as an aside, the distributed energy resources docket that's before the commission right now, the market track issues have been identified as an issue to be covered in 2018, but we think that's a really important issue that needs to be addressed as soon as possible, because I think solving the technical issues of interconnecting more renewable energies can be done. I always make a joke about engineers. They can find a solution if you throw enough money at it. The problem, again, we don't want rates to increase significantly or, if possible, at all. So we are trying to make sure we are looking at the market issues as soon as possible, and then also very interested in the regulatory issues, because until we resolve those things, I think it's going to be hard to move forward into the 21st century utility model. And one other thing I know our office is really interested in working on, and we've kind of reached out to the utility companies, DBED, and some other parties, is trying to improve the data that's available to everyone, to the regulators, to the utility companies, to the stakeholders. Because once we get that data in front of people, we can make more informed decisions. Until then, we're just kind of making just broad shots out there and hoping we're going to get a good conclusion, a good solution. But I think we really need to be more focused in terms of trying to make sure we're making informed decisions.
And Dean, I think that your comments lead us quite nicely into the next question: what needs to change? And since you went last this time, I want to give you the benefit of going first now. But you can answer that broadly in terms of whether it's technical, regulatory, ownership structure. I think that you raised some very interesting points with regards to this essentially being an exercise in constraint optimization. We need to keep in mind the cost as well as the 100% renewable objectives. So what are your thoughts on what needs to change, and then we'll do others down the line?
Well, I'll start with the market design issues, and we'll probably have to touch base with you, seeing how that's one of your the subjects you teach. But I think until we really fix some of those pricing signals that's available to customers as well as the vendors, we're going to be looking at a potentially market that's developing in a less than efficient manner. And so that's why I made the point of we really need to try to fix that as soon as possible, because right now, the current rate design, we're looking at fixed rates, we're looking at the inclining block rates. Certainly, we've had some recent conferences talking about the benefits of having real-time pricing. I would have to offer, again, we need to take a measured and balanced approach, because in terms of some of the surveys that we've seen, customers really don't understand how they're charged for their electricity right now. So offering them real-time pricing, or even to some degree time-of-use pricing, there will be a subset of customers that will appreciate and be able to respond to that. But I think in large part, there's a significant portion of the customer base that really won't be able to take advantage of that. And I think part of that is we'll have to make a collective effort to help our customers, the people of Hawaii, better understand how they're charged for electricity, so that once we start to look at these market design issues, people will be able to actually take advantage of them. Because it'd be a shame to try to spend a lot of effort to come up with new technology, new rate design, and ultimately there's no or little uptake on that. So I think really one of the things we really do need to fix, and I'll keep saying this more than a few times, is the market design issues. And part of that, I think, is also trying to fix the regulatory model. I've been a part of this regulatory process for over 25 years, and I'm very comfortable with it, but I realize that we do need to change it as well, because right now, if we continue to use the existing system, I don't think we'll be able to move as fast as we should in terms of trying to fix market design issues, as well as addressing other regulatory issues.
Actually, I could always just say ditto, move on, because a lot of the things that Dean mentioned are things that I would say and support. I think some of the other things is, again, as we look at the regulatory process and how the utilities are working with PUC, we have to be thinking more broadly about how that can work. I go back to the point again that some of the issue really is going to reflect back. We're going to want to put all of these new technologies in place, but we don't want to do it in a way that is going to increase prices significantly, particularly as it may impact low-income families. So I think some of the things we need they're going to be more in the way of information sharing, because making informed decisions is really critical. And a lot of times what I characterize as some of these laws that come out of either the national or a variety of states, I work in other states, they're dataless laws, because people don't think about how these things are evolving and how information can best be utilized. So I think in terms of information, that becomes critical. And along those lines, I think time of use pricing is important, because that gets into thinking about demand response and automated demand response. But you are going to have the tools that will be able to help everyone, not just certain individuals, because otherwise it can be a regressive tax on some people. So that doesn't necessarily work. So I think over again, as I mentioned, I'm an incrementalist. So I think one of the things that needs to be done and changed and pushing is kind of what I didn't mention in my earlier comments is, the Clean Energy Initiative is 10 years old. And so things that we said were going to happen back in 2009, 2010 did not happen. But in the meantime, things that we were not anticipating happening did happen. And so we're meeting our goals rather readily. But I think we need to really take a look at this. We need to get sectors working together and really requires governmental leadership, as was shown back in 2008, about how people are going to work together to affect change. And affect change in a positive way. So you're not sticking it to people with higher rates, but at the same time, and I'm picking up on what Dean just said earlier, that you're really going to deal with a resilient system, because I think the state's economy overall needs profitable utilities that have a grid that's stable and resilient. And without all of those things, I think we're in trouble.
Yeah, ditto. Both. So let me just add, I think what also will need to change will be how all of us, including everybody here in the room, how we all think about technology and our role in the R&D, the development of that technology. That's going to happen outside of a formal regulatory framework if we let it happen. So one of the challenges that we have right now is we can spend so much time and effort trying to design the perfect system, regulatory system, programs, and so on. And meanwhile, we will all get overtaken by what's happening in the actual tech development sector. And a very, very aggressive tech sector will find a way to bypass whatever we're trying to figure out very, very quickly. Because ultimately, if they can figure out what the customers need and desire, and they can figure out a way to deliver it to that customer, they'll do it. And that's actually should be a good thing, provided that within our context here in Hawaii, we can actually have that progression happen within the context of moving everybody forward. So our framework needs to be much more nimble. It has to be much more flexible. And I think we have to recognize, or at least figure out, what is the role of our entities in terms of actually being direct participants in that R&D. A couple of years ago, I was on at a workshop that was hosted by the Electric Power Research Institute and the Stanford University Business School Law School. And what they were trying to ask, they had invited a bunch of us regulated utility guys. And what they were asking is, how can the technology sector most readily work with regulated utility companies to get new technologies into your businesses and into your systems? And it was a very, very telling moment when almost everybody across the board, and these are, I was representing Hawaiian Electric, we had PG&E, we had large mainline utilities from the East Coast and the Midwest, and almost every one of us said, well, we do not think of ourselves as first movers or first users of new technologies, because we are not expected to do that, and or maybe the right terminology is, although we may want to do that, it's not really in our system, including our regulatory system, that's our role, because the risk to our customers of experimenting and trying new things, at least in the old regulatory system, it really was not provided for. So I think that's a pressure point for us, because especially here in Hawaii, we actually want to push forward. We want to be more innovative. We want to be able to experiment more. But our system is somewhat constraining, and I don't put blame on any one party here. However, it's the system that we have in place which is not fast enough, and it's not nimble enough, and it's not innovative enough. So I would just add that to your folks' comments.
I want to talk a little bit about the economics of our rates in place in Hawaii. We're moving technology-wise towards a 21st century utility, bringing in a lot of high-tech systems and products to our customers throughout the state. Unfortunately, we have a 1940s rate structure in place, and it's not cost-of-service-based rates anymore. The customers don't really understand what's going into the cost of their electric service, and that causes bad economic decisions to be made throughout the state, or risk of deploying capital inefficiently, which can put upward pressure on rates, put upward risk on economic decisions. And we simply have to get our rate structure where the customers understand the cost of operating the utility and make good economic decisions as they deploy their capital and as the utilities deploy their capital. One example of buried or embedded costs in every utility bill in the state is state taxes, state and local taxes. How many people in this room know that almost 10% of your utility bill goes to taxes? Not many. It's that's a big chunk, big piece of coin that's going out every day. It's also the embedded cost of wires, transmission costs, distribution costs out there. Nobody knows for sure how much it is because we don't provide that information. And we need to do it so people can make the right decisions and invest their capital wisely.
Thanks, David. So what I'd like to do is, before we get to questions, I'd like each one of you to quickly identify not a model, but someplace where you think there's something worthwhile that could be adopted here. It looks like Terry's been nominated to start with that. So, Terry, if you could do that quickly, and then we'll go to Scott. and then David amended that. Just something where you think that here in Hawaii we could take some thoughts. In other words, I hesitate to use the word lessons because that implies a certain superiority, inferiority, but rather just things that might inform the evolution of the sectors here in Hawaii.
To me, the model is how everybody. The reality is, I'm back here. I came back here in January and hadn't really been here much in about 7 years, and yet, this is a small community. I know a lot of people in this room, and I think that, to me, the model requires people working together. And I think you need to key in on certain critical factors, and we've all already talked about them. I mean, you need better transparency, as Dave mentioned. I think that without that, people are wondering, why am I paying so much? You need to be paying attention to the cost as it affects the ratepayer, because otherwise you may get divergence. And you can come out with policies that look great on paper, and yet there's a divergence in terms of who pays and who gets stuck with a greater portion of the bill. I think you need to deal with the resiliency and stability issues of the grid, because we all want to get to 100%. And again, my view is, I go back to this as an incrementalist. How do we really think strongly and also implement things over the next 10 years of the Clean Energy Initiative to do things? So in the end, the model to me is more about how do you choose to run things. I mean, it's going to be up to the utilities to push for change as much as it is going to be for the regulators to push for change. And along those lines, if we are not flexible, and I think all of the people here have already mentioned this, if we get locked into some things where we're not transparent and not flexible, certain things are going to happen where the world and the technology is just going to move beyond the state. So to me, the whole idea for the model is re-energizing the fact that you must work together, you must be flexible to benefit the end users, but to maintain a reasonably robust grid.
Thanks, Terry. Scott, do you have in mind any particular jurisdictions that you think have ideas that are relevant for the circumstances here? And it doesn't have to be the US, it could be anywhere in the world.
Jurisdictions. Well, maybe the best I can describe would be maybe similar to some of the areas, for example, on the mainland, where you have very strong relationships between the university systems, technology, and then, of course, the local business sector. What I think of as almost a critical what needs to happen here is that, like Terry was saying, we all need to work together to achieve this very, very aggressive goal. We cannot, as a state or as a individual island, just say, okay, here is your moonshot goal, and have at it, right? And be the best person or persons win. So how do we actually stitch together the role of critical entities like the University of Hawaii, who can bring in the research dollars? How can we have the private sector industry step up and play their role to be able to monetize that research here in Hawaii? And I'm not just saying buy stuff from elsewhere and bring it into Hawaii. I'm saying actually develop the capabilities here in our state so that we can actually see good economic growth in the area of clean tech. And then, of course, the utilities role can be there. I mean, we already are basically serving as a great test platform for many of these technologies. But what I see lacking so far is that we haven't brought everybody together strongly enough. I mean, in a way, people ought to think, okay, we are all here in Hawaii. This is going to sound a little bit, maybe, I'm not sure what I would call this, but Hawaii first. So if you are going to come here to Hawaii, Hawaii first. Sorry for our mainland guests, but too bad. That's how it should be. We are at the front of the tip of the spear in this world in trying to figure this out. So if you're going to come here and you're going to make your investments here, then by gosh, Hawaii as a state should benefit. We ought to have the jobs created here, build our economy around this clean tech sector. So the jurisdiction, I don't know that it currently exists, but I do think that we can take some examples of how you have very, very tight relationships between some of the entities I mentioned, and really everybody is single, laser focused on getting Hawaii forward and building the economy, building the jobs for kids.
Great, that's very helpful. David, as a co-op, do you think that you would be looking in different places for ideas than some of the other panelists, or do you think that the issues that are faced are universal regardless of the structure?
The issues, the technologies, the issues, the operating utility are really the same. It's the co-op brings the customer focus. We have no other parties to look out for, no shareholders. So we're very tied into doing what the people on an island or within the utility want to do. I think that's a big advantage for a co-op. I think that technology in Hawaii, I'm still hung up on the make Hawaii great again. keep Hawaii great. Make it great. Keep it great. The technologies, I don't even know in Hawaii that it's more system focused, it's island focused. And I really think there's a big push between the non-Oahu islands and the technologies that can work in Oahu. Totally different challenges. I'm increasingly starting to think that the technology to solve our problem on all the other islands is here. It's the PV or wind with storage. The technology is evolving. As long as these batteries work, we have the ability to bring in low-cost, stable energy for a long time at a flat price. So I think the other islands, the solutions are there. If this battery technology works, it may be here now, but the focus on Oahu is totally different. They don't have the land, they don't have the low-cost land to do big-scale solar to cover the need. They got so much more size that it's more, I think it's more an island focus than an organizational structure or any technology. I think it's Oahu's totally different than the others.
Great, that's helpful. Dean, I thought I'd give the customers the last word, if that works for you.
Sure, that's fine. I'll keep this brief. I just want to say that, as you pointed out earlier, Hawaii is unique. We're on a rock in the middle of the Pacific, and we don't have the interconnections that the other jurisdictions do. But we can look at what the other jurisdictions on the mainland are doing. But I know our office is also looking at what some other island countries are, trying to do with respect to trying to get to 100% renewable. But each jurisdiction, each locale is different. And we just have to be mindful of that as we look at other models, whether it's technical or economic, and try to make sure that what we do here is what makes Hawaii great.
Well, before we break, we have time for 3 questions. Please state your name and your affiliation, and also if there's a particular panelist that you want to direct your question to, please state that as well. And does Jillian have the mic? Okay. So in the back, we're definitely not going to throw the mic all the way back there. So am I.
So this question is for Dean. My name is Monica Rocha. I'm at DBET. And so you mentioned that you have been looking at what other island communities are doing in terms of adopting renewable energy. Can you talk about that? And can you also talk about what is the relationship with the adoption of renewable energy? Is it generally positive? Do they express a lot of concern? What are you seeing and what can we learn here?
Can I just speak up?
Well, no, in fact, I can give you my that's right.
Well, to be honest, I mean, we started that research. We're looking at what other cultures are doing. I know there are a couple of examples, as far as I know, that we found so far with respect to certain island communities that are also striving to be 100% renewable energy. And we're looking at the economic models. We really haven't. That's a good question in terms of how the communities are responding to the goal and how they've embraced it. But I think that that is a very important part to ensure that the consumers are part of that process, because it should be done independently of that. That also can be something that we should keep in mind as we look at other island countries or communities. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Brad Burkle with EIP Technologies. We're a startup based in Oregon with combined wind and storage power. Yeah, my question is for Scott. You talked about the challenge of wanting to have access to new technology being R&D, but you can't really be on the front end of the risk side of it. So what are some of the best mechanisms for us mainland side startups to engage with you folks?
Well, right now we have a lot of engagement through, well, let me back up. So sometimes we are directly approached by new startup technology companies. We have generally been able, in limited cases, to actually explore those technologies. And actually, in some instances, we've actually gone so far to actually have somewhat limited experimentation, right? We'll actually deploy some of the equipment and see how it works, right? In other cases, we actually have a couple of great technology accelerators here locally. It used to be Energy Accelerator, now it's called Elemental. Is that Elemental Accelerator? Meaning that they've broadened even beyond energy. So when we are looking at participating with companies that are involved in those accelerator businesses, that actually it also makes it a little bit easier for us to work with them, because we know they've gone through a fairly robust vetting process. So that's another great way to engage with the utility. I think it's just going to be as we see in the future, as we go forward in the future, on the Hawaii side, we will get clearer in our understanding of what the needs are. And that should actually make it easier for us then to identify the technologies and the vendors that actually will rise up to the top. So it is going through that process. I think maybe if I look back over the last 5 years or so, part of the challenge was we were moving so rapidly that a lot of times you couldn't even determine truly what the need was before engaging with people offering the solutions.
To add to that, it is a matter of you networking with people. So as Scott knows, I was on the board of Pictor when we started the accelerator, and it really is helpful for you to be working with them. The other thing, having been in the national labs and with EPRI, so these guys were my client, so full disclosure, but the whole idea is to work through them and connect back, because certainly for the utilities, if there's some vetting of this technology and some partnerships being developed before the fact, before you come to them, I think that's very helpful. And I can add, being a child of the labs, or a lab rat, just think how you want to describe it, is that given what the fiscal 18 budget is going to look like on a national level, the national labs are really going to be looking for partnerships with good ideas, because there's still going to be opportunities to do this kind of work. And there's still a lot of interest in Hawaii, because there's certain aspects of our grid that are truly unique, that you can look at utilizing these technologies here. And I realize that kind of gets away from, you know, using you as a guinea pig that may impact costs, etc. But on the other hand, which we have to take into account, but on the other hand, I think it still provides a venue for doing things here first. And again, make Hawaii great again.
Yeah, you know, I did forget to mention our use of EPRI, Electric Power Research Institute. We often do ask our support at EPRI, hey, have you heard of this technology? Have you heard of this particular company? What are your thoughts? So I know that the utility space is oftentimes one of the most challenging to sort of break into as a technology developer. I would like to say that here in Hawaii, Hawaiian Electric at least, and I know Dave at KIUC, we are probably among the most progressive in terms of utilities being willing to at least talk to technology developers and then take it from there.
So we're going to take one last quick question. Please.
Thank you. Ben Sullivan, County of Kauai. My question is whether this process is really looking broad enough, and you know, I think an example being the California Energy Commission actually has a full division on transportation. And the question is, are we thinking that this could actually yield a much broader scope for the PUC or for the utilities? And if so, are the right people involved to allow that to potentially happen?
So you keep bringing things up about my checkered past, because I was on loan to the California Energy Commission running an R&D program. And I think your question is very appropriate. My own, and I'm going to give you my personal opinion, I think the current look at the utility business models are rather narrowly defined, that, you know, the legislature wanted us to look at that. But your point is spot on, because we really need to look at this as much in how are the utilities going to be managed, provide leadership, work with the regulators, you know, they also do the Public Utilities Commission. How are they going to do things to move things along, be flexible, and what is going to be the how? How are you going to run things? And then to your point about transportation, again, spot on, because the transportation world is going to be changing. As you know, we had the bill that go through for the 100% renewable transportation. And we really need to start looking at what do we do in terms of the interaction between electric vehicles and the grid. I mean, there's good things that can happen, but there could also be potentially bad things that are happening. How do they relate from a systems perspective? And I would argue we may be seeing that first here in Hawaii. And what are the impacts going to be, and what do we do about it? So I think all of these things may be appropriate to look for. So my advice to you is get back to your legislator and ask for more money to do more analysis.
Sorry, if I could just add real quickly. You know, so then when we were on Kauai the other month for a conference that Holy Green Growth had organized, we had a lot of discussion about decarbonization as opposed to RPS, renewable portfolios. And I think it was a collective agreement. If I remember, I think you and I were on the same breakout group. Okay, maybe that's why I'm channeling Ben here. But I mean, that is I think that is an absolute must from a policy discussion that has to take place. And whether it is within the scope of work of this study or not, it needs to be brought forward, which is RPS. Right now, all of the focus is on KIUC, Hawaiian Electric companies, about how much more generation, wind, solar have you been able to add, and then what do you need to do to add, you know, to the grid to accommodate all that renewable generation. Decarbonization broadens the discussion to think about our transportation sector. It talks about our energy efficiency and conservation practices. It really does set a broader playing field, but it's actually necessary, because if all you keep focusing on is RPS and RPS, you are missing an entire probably the majority of what this state is doing in terms of adding to climate change. So how's that for an answer?
Great. I'd like to thank our panelists. Really appreciate you taking the time and being a bit in the firing line. I hadn't anticipated that the chairs were going to be so high here. But I'm going to turn it over to Len, who's going to describe the process from here on.
Hi again, I'm Len. So now that we have heard from this wonderful gentleman, now we want to hear from you. So we invite people at the back to please join a table. So each table we will go through 3 different topics. The first topic is vision. How do you see Hawaii's energy sector in the future? And the second one is who are the key stakeholders and how do you think they can impact the energy future of Hawaii? And the last one is how do stakeholders work together to take action to move towards Hawaii's goal? So we will have 40 minutes for each topic. Discussions should be done by 12 noon. So we have time to summarize what happened for each group. And each table will have a facilitator to facilitate the discussion. The facilitator will give further instructions and provide guidance for each group. I would just like to ask for the facilitator to please stand up so they would know who are the facilitators. I know they're probably scattered around the room.
Yeah.
So we have.
We'll make sure there's one on that table.
Okay. And so Gary wanted me to mention that we also have a subcontractor who were not able to come here in Hawaii. So we have some people from the bed to help us facilitate the group discussions. So after each discussion topic, the facilitator will summarize what has been discussed. And after all the 3 topics have been discussed, the group will nominate one person to summarize what has been discussed in their group, and they will report back at 12 noon. And then for our remote participants, we have a go-to webinar. So we're actually live streaming right now. So they can also provide their feedback. They can chat with our people from our Boston office and provide their feedback on these 3 topics that I've just mentioned. And we will also report back their inputs to these topics. So I guess I'll invite everybody to please choose a table, and the facilitators will also go to each table and facilitate the discussion.
Yeah.